A single candle sputtered in the black bell of the Tower of the Hand, its flame clawing at the damp air as though it wished to flee the draft-choked corridors and stone-cooled secrets of the Red Keep. Varys stood beside that feeble light, robed in layered silks of twilight lilac that muffled both movement and intention. The faint glimmer painted half his face in trembling gold, and left the other half to the hush of shadow. A living reminder that every man, even a spider, was divided between light he disclosed and darkness he nurtured. Upon the wide oaken table before him lay three objects: a chipped goblet of arbor red gone half to vinegar, a rolled parchment sealed only by the pressure of his own palm, and a heavy copper key corroded green along its teeth. He stared at the key as a man might ponder his soul, wondering not at its shape, but at the last lock it would open, and whether that lock should ever have been forged. The parchment had arrived with no sigil and no flourish, delivered by a squire seldom noticed in the swirl of highborn pageantry. Its words were blunt, its handwriting timid, and its message unmistakable. Winter was marching south quicker than ravens could fly. Wildlings had broken beneath the other's claws. Castles long stout along the wall now whistled with blue-white winds. The Night's Watch, what tatters remained, begged for fire, dragon glass, or the old songs of Orlor, anything that burned. Instead, the realm feasted, each lord gnawing at the bones of his neighbor's pride, refusing to taste dread until the chill slipped beneath their doors. Even the candle on Varys' table shivered. He lifted the copper key, feeling its mass pull at old memories. Decades ago, back when Aerys Targaryen still squatted on the Iron Throne muttering of betrayers and betrayal, that same key opened the vaults beneath the Great Sept. There, hidden behind false walls of plaster and prayer, slept ceramic jars painted with no heraldry, only a sigil of green flame lapping at a skull. Pyromancer wisdom insisted each jar contained the rage of a captive son. Common smallfolk believed they cupped demons. Varys, younger then, had knelt in that subterranean heat, had listened to pots hum like bees sick with nectar, and had wondered how a kingdom could survive so much concentrated death. Now, older, heavier, wiser, and wearier, he wondered instead whether the kingdom could survive without it. He slid the goblet aside with a fluttering hand. He dared not cloud his thoughts with wine tonight. Carefully he unrolled the parchment once more, though he had committed every blotted word to memory. Fistfuls of ink described ice whites breaking through the last river, others crossing Queen's Crown on frost-garmered steeds. One line, scribbled rather than penned, claimed the weirwood faces themselves, wept crimson tears that froze before they reached carved chins. The strangest note spoke of a wind that thinks, swirling above each army, listening to every mortal plan and whispering it out of existence. The letter did not beg him to act. It merely declared truths too vast for any single man's shoulders, yet truths that weighed upon his heart as surely as chains. A gentle knock lilted against the chamber door, as polite as court etiquette mandated and as insistent as armed revolt. Varys set parchment and key to rest and composed his smile. That soft, sad curve, which could never be mistaken for joy. "Enter," he chimed, and the door eased inward to reveal Tyrion Lannister dressed in sable velvet that shimmered like wet coal. The impi's mismatched eyes flicked to the candle, then to the letter uncoiled beside it. "Plotting by candlelight," Tyrion said, closing the door with a heel. "I half expected you to be bathing in rosewater at this hour." "I save rosewater for victories, my lord," Varys replied. "Tonight calls for harsher perfumes." "Worry then. Worry stinks." Tyrion climbed a footstool by the table's edge and poured arbor red into a second cup. "Is not Varys? Let me guess. Dead men walking while falling, small folk screaming? Stark tidings for a spider who's spun every web south of Moat Cailin." Varys allowed a breath to slip past his lips, unsure whether it was sigh or confession. "You are, as ever, incisive. The wall cannot hold. Jon Snow's ravens multiply, yet their wings bring only birds. The lords squabble. The dragons sulk in Meereen. I fear we have but one asset Westeros may wield in time. Melaneder." Tyrion's brow creased. Irony wrote itself in the lift of one corner of his mouth. Let me guess again. Something green, unstable, and quite fond of exploding. Wildfire, Varys whispered, caressing the copper key with knuckles. Old caches survive. Ones I left trapped below the streets during King Robert's reign, others hidden by the Mad King himself. Enough to drown a city, perhaps enough to burn an army carved from night. And Tyrion drank, cheeks flushing a shade brighter than the wine. You intend to unleash Aerys's forgotten horrors upon the realm. My father nearly did that rather than surrender King's Landing. We survived only by a whisker, and that whisker was me. Do you think the commons will praise a eunuch when their homes melt? I intend no mindless conflagration, Varys answered smoothly. I intend a controlled inferno where winter encroaches. I intend to meet ice with fire before ice meets flesh. And controlled by whom? By me, by you, by any man or woman we trust more than we trust to spare. Endersall. Tyrion set his goblet down hard enough the liquid leapt. Trust? In King's Landing? You have a darker sense of humor than I gave you credit for. Flame wavered between them. Minutes stretched taut as crossbow strings. Finally Tyrion inhaled, and the breath made a sound of pages turning. Suppose we do it. Suppose we flood the neck with wildfire, torch the King's Road all the way to Moat Cailin, roast every barrow and fen where White Walkers might pass. They'll find alternate routes. Rivers freeze. Mountains echo with passes unknown to us. Fire cannot stand eternal watch. Island. True, Varys conceded. But for a window, the span of perhaps a fortnight, we might delay them, long enough for Daenerys Stormborn to sail, long enough for maesters to pore over Valyrian scrolls and rediscover ancient defenses, long enough for the great houses of Westeros to unite or perish. Tyrion made to refill his cup, found it still near brimming, and downed the contents in 2 swallows. You paint hope in ash. I prefer my hope with fewer corpses. He leaned closer. Yet I cannot refuse you outright because you're correct. We have no other weapon ready. Jon his watch cannot bring Dragonglass south in time. Dragonfire itself lingers across the narrow sea. So we test your theory. But under one condition. Name it. That the wildfire never touches a single town unless whites already tread its streets. If civilians burn, this plot ends. I would sooner drink molten gold than become the next Mad King's hand. Varys inclined his head. Agreed. We stand together, or we fall to the cold. The spider and the imp clasped forearms. 2 conspirators balanced on the blade of desperation. Outside the tower, bells tolled the midnight watch, echoing across courtyards where guardsmen dozed in plate and sparrows whispered psalms. Somewhere beyond those walls, the black water kissed the sea, oblivious to history's pivot. And in the north, the long night breathed out another puff of frost. Before dawn, Varys departed the Red Keep cloaked in drab merchant browns. He rode a mule rather than a horse, because a mule posed fewer questions. The creature clopped across cobblestones still slick from an evening rain, carrying him through sleeping markets where bales of Irish peppers perfumed the dark. At the Street of Silk he turned inland, twisting down alleys choked with refuse and memory, until he reached a low archway disguised by shattered crates. He tethered the mule, pried loose a loose brick, and withdrew a bronze lamp already filled with tallow. With a flick of flint, he birthed a stubby flame and descended 50 spiraling steps into the belly of King's Landing. The passages were not sewers. Those lay deeper, but a network of forgotten service tunnels carved during Maegor's reign. Cobwebs draped iron sconces like mourning veils. Dust layered the flagstones thick enough to bear footprints, and Varys' own prints overlapped decades-old echoes of his past visits. He navigated by memory, counting alcoves, reading the slope of the ceiling, listening for the hush of moving air. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a chamber no larger than a septon's cell. In its center stood a crate latticed with iron bands, crowned by a tarnished lock whose keyhole stretched in a mournful grin. Varys knelt. Fingers trembled as he fitted the copper key, and a soft click shivered through stone. Inside the crate lay 4 small clay jars, each swaddled in lamb's wool. He brushed away the wool and smiled with the tenderness of a father meeting newborns. Upon each jar, the glaze depicted twin dragons circling a pillar of pyre. No pyromancer's mark adorned them. These were older still, perhaps Rhaenys Targaryen's secret endeavor, when she dreamt of wars yet fought. He lifted one jar. Even sealed with wax and lead, it radiated subtle warmth. A sound behind him. Soft leather pivoting on grit. Varys turned, still cradling Wildfire. A woman emerged from shadows, slender, hooded, eyes palest green. "Spider," she whispered. "Little Maeve," Varys answered. "You move quietly, even for my taste." Maeve bowed. She had once been a child he rescued from a Pentushi brothel. Now she was one of his most trusted whisperers, a blade concealed in rumor. "Your raven reached me. The cargo is prepared. 12 wagons, each paneled to appear as wine casks bound for Riverrun. Namun and she. 12 wagons?" Varys exhaled. If only wine were enough to halt the dead. Maeve's gaze fell upon the jar in his hands, and some sliver of candlelight caught in her eye. "Do you truly believe this fire can kill a White Walker? I believe nothing else can be mustered soon enough." He set the jar back into its cradle, covered it, and closed the crate. "And I believe fear should not rule men's hearts unchallenged." She stepped forward, pressing a sealed letter into his palm. "From the Grand Maester. Codes for the river gates. The wagons will roll at sunset." "Now, Stegan." Varys tucked the letter inside his tunic. "See they do. And mind the gold cloaks. They sniff any cargo bound north these days." He placed a hand upon the crate's lid, feeling the phantom pulse of heat. "Tell the driver. Keep the mules watered, avoid crowded lanes, and if a jar cracks, run. Don't look back." Maeve's face paled at that last command, but she nodded. "You would come north yourself?" "Perhaps. My counsel may be needed." He hesitated, contemplating Tyrion's promise of strictly regulated fire. A eunuch who never knew dragons might still dream of being one. Yet first I must convince a queen to lend her dragon's wings before the frost devours our path. Pray I succeed. With that, he extinguished the lamp, shrouding them both in a darkness alive with breath and purpose. When he opened his eyes again, he imagined he saw faint green motes drifting above the crate, embryonic sparks waiting to be born into Holocaust. He decided then he would not fear them. He would fear only what came behind them if he failed. Render. Across the narrow sea, dawn found Daenerys Targaryen pacing the polished decks of the flagship Vigar's Wrath. Her hair silver as a breaking wave, her eyes fixed upon the west where clouds gathered like sullen armies. The newly christened fleet rode gentle swells outside Marine's harbor, sails furled, rigging creaking like waking giants. Below, unsullied drilled in quiet ranks, shields flashing sunbursts. Above, Rhaegal and Viserion circled restless loops, while Drogon perched upon the aft mast, talons scarring ironwood as though he too longed for purpose. A gust caught the queen's cloak, unfurling its black hand-crimson lining, and her blood quickened at the horizon's cold hue. She had felt the change in the wind 2 days past, an undercurrent of chill that belonged not to summer's end, but to something older, something crueler. Last night, her dreams were all snowblind wastes and dead men whose eyes glimmered like sapphire lanterns. She woke with frost on her skin despite Meereen's heat. "Your Grace," said Missandei at her shoulder, voice soft as temple bells. "A ship draws near. She flies Lannister crimson, yet signals parley. Indeed, a lion alone would not dare," Daenerys murmured, though she suspected which lion had the gall. "Ready the rope ladder." When the smaller galley coasted alongside, Tyrion Lannister appeared upon its deck in travel-stained garments, surrounded by a retinue of guards who looked more petrified of Drogon's smoldering stare than any ambush. The dwarf raised a hand in greeting and shouted something lost to waves. Daenerys nodded once. Minutes later, Tyrion scaled the ladder with surprising vigor and stepped onto her deck, cheeks pink from exertion. He bowed low. "My queen, I bring urgent tidings from your realm." "Westeros is not yet my realm," she corrected, though a thrill stirred at the word. "Speak them nonetheless." She waved him toward her council cabin, where maps sprawled like wounded beasts across a long table. Gray worms stood guard as they entered, and when the door closed, the chaos of gulls and crew faded to a hush. Tyrion did not sit. He strode to the map of Westeros and tapped the neck between north and south. Here lies Moat Cailin. The others have passed the wall. Missandei caught her breath. Grey Worm's hand tightened on spear. Daenerys folded her arms over her breast. Jon's last raven claimed only the abandoned castles had fallen. It appears the abandoned castles were merely appetizers. Tyrion's tone lacked mirth. The dead advance. And we, King's Landing, the Reach, your armies, everyone, are woefully unprepared. We need Dragonfire over the neck within a moon's turn, or there will be no realm left to rule. But ships cannot sail through Bogland, and Drogon cannot be everywhere. He took a folded parchment from his sleeve. Varys proposes a line of wildfire here, here, and here. He marked points along the King's Road and the Fever River. A barrier of flame to buy you time. Daenerys' expression hardened. Wildfire? The same alchemist's fire that nearly swallowed King's Landing during Robert's rebellion? The very same. Only carefully placed, triggered when the dead approach. No innocent soul shall burn, not while I breathe. She paced, silver braid glinting. Cersei tried to roast her own people beneath the great septae. My family's legacy still stinks of Ares' pyromania. And now you ask me to sanction equal madness. I ask you to sanction survival, Tyrion said gently. What comes from the north is not life. It cannot be reasoned with. If we fail to sear them, they will add us to their legion. Silence settled thick as fog. Drogon roared outside, perhaps sensing his riders' unrest, rattling chains that tried and failed to hold him. Finally, Daenerys stopped before the map, palms flat upon its parchment hide. Show me the proposed depots. We shall refine them, and we sail within 3 days. Storm gods willing. Her violet eyes met his. But if wildfire ignites where it should not, if one child screams beneath green flames, I will look to you first for a recompense. Tyrion swallowed yet bowed. Understood. As he straightened, sunlight broke through a skylight, catching dust motes that drifted like snowflakes inside the cabin. Neither noticed how swiftly each mote melted in the beam's glow. And ace. When next Varys returned to the surface, the sky above King's Landing glimmered the pallid gray of sword steel, and gulls wheeled low as though smelling storm. 12 wagons waited in the shadow of Pinton's Gate, each driver a nondescript figure picked from Littlefinger's discarded spy networks, men whose loyalty could be purchased, but whose deaths would stir no songs. Varys inspected the false casks. Thin veneer concealed knotted oak staves reinforced with bands of black iron. He tapped one with knuckles. It answered with a dull, perilous hum. A troop of 4 gold cloaks paced near the gatehouse, gossiping about a fresh batch of Dornish wine seized at docks. Their sergeant, a burly man sporting 3 chins and 1 gleaming breastplate, glanced suspiciously as Varys approached. Show me bill of lading, the sergeant barked. Varys spread his hands, sleeves pooling like colored mist. I carry no writ, he said softly, but my master does. If you permit, we shall send to Maester Pycelle. The sergeant hawked phlegm. Pycelle's half corpse. But I'll not delay honest commerce. Honest commerce, Varys thought, masking a smile. Still, coin eases caution. His eyes roved Varys' silks with merchant's greed. Varys nodded and slipped 3 silver stags into the sergeant's palm. For refreshments. The man bit 1 coin, then waved wagons forward, eager to return to wine gossip. As each axle creaked over the threshold, Varys murmured a prayer to any god who'd listen that iron would hold, that drivers would obey, that frost would not reach these jars before fire had its reckoning. Once the convoy rumbled beyond the city, Varys mounted a small roundsy and followed at a discreet distance. Dust rose behind the wheels. The city receded as a smudge of red tiles and pale smoke. In its place spread the crowns of blackbark pines and fields, where harvested wheat lay in stubbled rows. Peasants paused from bundling sheaves to wave at the passing casks, assuming them wine for some distant feast. If they suspected the cargo could unmake worlds, they gave no sign. Perhaps ignorance, Varys reflected. was the only true mercy men like him could bestow. The first night, the wagons camped in a clearing beside the Blackwater Rush. Fireflies blinked like tiny green embers among reeds, mocking, in their gentle way, the sleeping juggernauts tethered to wood. Varys shared a meager supper of salt pork and peas, though appetite eluded him. He walked the perimeter while the drivers snored under tarpaulins, and at each wagon he pressed his ear against warm oak, listening. Sometimes he imagined he heard crackles, as though distant hearths burned within. Other times he thought the jars sang. Small, urgent areas pregnant with longing. He wondered if Wildfire desired release as a newborn desires air. At moonrise, a mist crept off the river. It feathered Varys' bald scalp with dew, it silvered every blade of grass, and it pooled low among wagon wheels until the convoy seemed to float upon some ghostly sea. Varys closed his eyes and pictured White Walkers gliding across a different fog. Ice blades whispering, eyes a-cold. Somewhere they marched. Somewhere graves surrendered their hosts. A pale tide rolled forth, and here on this bank he hoarded fire like a miser hoards gold. He did not feel heroic. He felt frightened, and he hated himself a little less for that. Fear, after all, was honest. North of the wall, now broken in 3 jagged wounds, Tormund Giantsbane stumbled through ankle-deep snowmelt, cursing softly. Behind him, ghostly survivors of his raiding troop followed with vacant stares. Each man's beard rhymed white, though the air tasted more of autumn than winter. They had outrun the others by mere hours. Scaling cliffs, wading rivers numbed to bone. When last Tormund looked back, he saw Hardhome in flames of azure, not red. Trees blistered black as bog muck while silhouettes burned bright as cerulean torches, and yet no heat chased him. Only a chill so deep it felt like sorrow. He spied the ragged palisades of Eastwatch by the sea, or what remained. The castle's once whitewashed towers sagged under gargoyles of frost. Footprints, half filled by drifting snow, told of Night's Watch stragglers retreating inland. Somewhere within, horns sounded, the mournful 3 blasts that meant others approaching. Tormund's band, gripped obsidian daggers, traded from the crow-lord snow. They numbered fewer than 20 now. Some clutched arms hacked from dead foes. One woman, Scotty Crowkiller, carried her infant swaddled in a direwolf pelt. The baby did not cry. Perhaps instinct taught him silence against such predators. The gate creaked open, and a lanky ranger beckoned them inside, eyes bulging with equal parts terror and relief. "The Lord Commander has fled to Castle Black," the ranger rasped. "Eastwatch is lost. Good brothers scuttle like rats." Tormund slammed a fist to his chest. "Then we scuttle too, Crow. South, south, until our feet find warm dirt. Where is your flaming queen with her scaly beasts?" "Benjamin," the ranger swallowed. "Ravens claim she sails. Others say Wildfire will be loosed along the neck." "Fire's fire," Tormund muttered. He thought of the unnatural blue fire of Hardhome and shivered. He hoped the green fire of alchemists bit harder. They rested only long enough to raid stores. Salted cod, dried beans, lantern oil. Then they marched again beneath dawn that shed no warmth. Tormund glanced at the infant swaddled against Scotty's chest. He vowed the babe would someday tell tales of how men defied death with fire, older than dragons. He vowed, though his vows were flavored with dread, that south of the neck there was still a world worth the telling. Days later, as Varys' convoy neared Harrenhal's smoking ruins, ravens thundered overhead. Dozens, maybe hundreds, wings frantic. Some black shapes fell mid-flight, feathering earth with dead birds whose eyes were milky as frost-bitten sky. Drivers spat oaths, urging mules faster. From the west, a wind rose that stank of snow, though no clouds accompanied it. Trees bent away as though cowed. Varys felt the hairless nape of his neck prickle. At dusk, they reached an abandoned millhouse overlooking the God's Eye. The lake mirrored a bruised, roiling sky, waves choppy in unnatural breeze. A fisherman's dock lay smashed, boats dashed upon rocks. Varys ordered wagons circled and lamps hooded. Tonight, No fires would burn. Wildfire need not lure accidental sparks. He withdrew to the mill's loft, seeking solitude to parse new intelligence Maeve had delivered that morning. Skagos had fallen. Bear Island emptied save for old women and stronger bears. Jon Snow marched south with wildling allies toward the neck. But worse, much worse, unnamed storms gathered off Cape Kraken. Sailors spoke of lightning silent as moonlight and thunder that never echoed. Varys suspected the others manipulated weather as a general manipulates swords, that the winds now scouted for them. He gazed down at crates glistening in torch splash, and pictured icy squalls snuffing courage from men's hearts, leaving only these shaking casks as bulwark. He thought of his childhood on the streets of Myr, when hunger and fear had taught him to gamble with illusions. He had stolen trinkets, sold whispers, survived by turning terror into coin. That same lesson thrummed now. When despair profits none, create hope, even if hope is a lie wrapped round a powder keg. He closed his eyes, willing sleep. But through cracks in timber, he saw a thin mist creep across the lake, luminous and curious. It coiled near the wagons, tendrils seeking seams and tarp. Varys found his breath lodged in throat. Then a gust scattered the fog, leaving only stillness. He exhaled. Perhaps just night air. Yet when he at last succumbed to nightmares, they were filled with serpents of green fire wrestling white wolves under a sky of weeping stars. And dull. At River Run's repurposed war room, a stable cleansed of straw and heaped instead with maps, Ser Brienne of Tarth studied a charcoal sketch of the next rivers. Beside her stood Sansa Stark, her copper hair braided tight like intent. Lords Small and Lesser argued at the periphery, tongues wagging over supply routes, volunteer levies, and how to pronounce pyromancer without spitting. It's madness, Lord Glover declared, banging a fist. We hold a line of green alchemist sludge, one arrow, one spark, and we roast ourselves. And if we do nothing, we don't roast. We freeze, Sansa replied, voice smooth as dirk steel. Wildfire is our shield, until Daenerys arrives. Brienne pointed to a series of red crosses stretching along the Fever River. We position catapults here. When White's cross, we hurl pots, then ignite with torches dipped in lamp oil. The flames will ride the current north, forming a wall taller than any masonry. And pray the wind favors us, Lord Glover muttered. A runner burst through doors, mud spraying. Convoy sighted east of the Twins, he panted. Dozens of wagons. Spider sigil on driver's cloak. Sansa's shoulders loosened a fraction. Varys, she whispered. Brienne exhaled. We must greet him, and we must inform Jon at once. The dead will not tarry. Now. And far above all mortal schemes, a raven with 3 eyes perched within a cavern of weirwood branches, tangled like bleached veins. Bran Stark, the boy who had once flown only in dreams, murmured to the bird, his lips moving in tandem with its beak. Through a tapestry of time-worn roots, he watched fires gathering, wagons diverging, dragons unfurling wings. He saw green storms awaiting blue ones, saw men poised upon knife's edges of conscience. One truth glowed brighter than wildfire. Every choice cost life. Bran reached into the skein of hours and nudged a single strand. Nothing more than a breeze over a lake near Harrenhal that would extinguish a candle too near a tarp, preventing catastrophe long before it thought to happen. Tiny mercies could tip scales. Then he turned his gaze north where the Night King rode an elk of ice across a glacier forming mid-tear. The creature's hooves left no prints, yet reality cracked beneath them. Behind the Night King trailed phantoms of departed kings, queens, paupers. A parliament of silence. Bran felt their attention tilt southward, at whispers of wildfire, as though the cold desired to taste whatever heat men mustered. He frowned. Fire attracts cold as surely as blood attracts flies, he realized. Still, without fire, none would stand. He released the raven's vision and opened his human eyes to the world of stone and root. Let them burn brightly, he murmured. Let the night behold our fury. Ready. On the third morning after leaving King's Landing, The convoy clattered into the mile-long causeway that bridged the Green Fork near the Twins. Mist draped riverbanks like burial cloth. Midway across, the lead mule balked, braying. Driver cursed, snapped reins. From fog ahead drifted silhouettes. 5, 10, dozens, human shapes, unmoving. Varys dismounted, heart pounding. He approached, silk boots whispering on planks. As he neared, silhouettes resolved into men armored in rusted chain, their flesh mottled blue-black, eyes burning a sapphire hell. Whites. Somehow they had slipped south, perhaps via boats stolen from Sisterton or ice floes across the Bight. Now they blocked Varys' only route. And behind him, wagons rocked, loaded with apocalypse. Drivers screamed. One loosed a crossbow. Bolt thunked into undead shoulder, useless. The whites surged without sound. Varys seized a torch from its sconce on the nearest wagon, but flame guttered in damp wind. He needed more. A jar. No. He must not shatter a jar here. The bridge would become a pyre, sealing the river crossing for friend and foe alike. Yet if he hesitated, the dead would reach the casks, burst them by claw, perhaps even drown them in icy water, robbing men of their weapon. "Cut the horses loose," he shouted. "Back down the bridge. Form line." Drivers scrambled, mules kicked, hooves clanging. The leading wagon reversed, wheels grinding, nearly toppling. Whites closed, blank faces shining moist. An axe swung, a mule's head flew, geysering blood that steamed in unnatural cold. Varys tasted iron on wind and thought, "Tyrion, my friend, forgive me." He ripped open the wagon's side hatch, exposing a single jar tucked amid straw. With shaking hands, he cradled its smooth belly. A white lunged. Varys leapt back, jar raised above his head. "Father, mother, warrior." He prayed to gods he never knew. "Let this serve life." He smashed the jar upon the planks. For one heartbeat it remained whole, leaking vivid green. Then air-kissed liquid, and the world erupted. Flames geysered skyward, licking fog, devouring white and wood alike. Screams became hollow pops as bodies boiled. Heat hurled Varys backward. He struck rail, clothes searing. Yet the fire parted around him, as though it sensed its architect. Bridge beams detonated. Supports buckled. Burning planks rained into river, sizzling. When blaze subsided to crackling sheet, Varys crawled, coughing. Before him lay a crater of charred corpses, bones glowing emerald. The bridge sagged but held. Wagons behind him, though scorched, remained intact. He rose on wobbling legs. He had deployed a single jar and survived. The Wildfire's appetite had proven both gluttonous and precise. No living driver burned, only dead foes. A miracle born from horror. But now the whites knew. Somewhere beyond the smoke, others would feel this raising as spiders feel web tremors. They would adapt, perhaps send winds fiercer still. Varys wiped soot from brow, commanding drivers onward. They must cross before the structure failed. As wheels turned, he glanced into water where green fire flickered just below the surface, dancing like drowned spirits. He wondered how many more such dances awaited. Jamin. Tyrion stood upon the quarterdeck of Vhagar's Wrath, watching spray glitter against prow. The fleet had reached the open sea, sails fat with easterly gusts. Yet gulls overhead wheeled in frantic spirals. Shrieking warnings the wind failed to translate. Tyrion sipped watered wine, nerves sharp as glass. Below, Daenerys knelt before Drogon, stroking his midnight scales. She whispered in Valyrian, coaxing him skyward to scout. Drogon launched, wings unfurling in thunderclap. Sea trembled beneath his shadow. The sight should have filled Tyrion with triumph. Instead he felt dread. Dragons invited myths to awaken, and wildfire beckoned legends of ruin. He sensed movement beside him. Ser Jorah Mormont steadied himself against rail, gray beard dripping brine. Queen's heart is heavy, the knight spoke. She fears these fires below will taint her fires above. Fire is fire. Tyrion watched Drogon vanish into a bank of clouds. But not all flames illuminate. Some merely consume. Jorah studied the dwarf's profile. Which do we wield now? Tyrion's answer drifted with gull cries. Both, Ser Jorah. Pray we control which one burns longest. Night cloaked the neck. Sansa Stark sat within a command tent pitched on an islet among reeds. She traced finger along a candle's molten runnels, mind wandering to Winterfell's Godswood, where once she prayed for songs and nights. Now she prayed for explosions and survival. Distance thundered. Perhaps real thunder, perhaps rumblings of some giant's approach. Outside, sentries murmured about a green glow earlier on the twins' horizon. Good, she thought. Varys lived. She reached for quill and parchment. My lady, Brienne asked from Flap. The last scouts returned. No undead within 5 leagues. 5 leagues, Sansa repeated. Enough to breathe. Not enough to rest. Brienne entered, eyes gentle. Word from Jon. He marches with wildlings and umbers. 3 days out. And Archmaester Yennefer rides with a wain of obsidian. Men and gnomes. Sansa set quill aside, suddenly weary. 3 days may span an age. Brienne knelt. I will stand at your side for each heartbeat of it. Sansa offered a small smile. Then let's ensure those heartbeats continue. Brienne rose, hand brushing pommel of Oathkeeper. Candlelight kissed Valyrian steel, and for an instant the blade shimmered not red or gold, but a strange fleeting green, reflection of a flame yet lit. They both stared, silent. If swords bore omens, perhaps Wildfire's promise lingered even here. One. From atop the wall's shattered middle breach, the Night King watched storm fronts churn. Frost crystals spiraled round his outstretched palm, weaving delicate lattice that caught moonlight in savage splendor. At his feet, 10,000 wights gathered, eyes blank. But if their jaws clenched in silent oath, no man could hear. Far below, giants of ice lumbered, dragging sledges toward ruined winter towns. He tilted his helm as though listening. Somewhere far south, beyond ridges of gloom, something answered with a roar of emerald conflagration. Fire-old as mad kings, reckless as mortal fear. The Night King's sapphire irises brightened. He lowered hand, and the frost lattice shattered, drifting like silver dust. He spoke a word none alive could pronounce. The wind obeyed, swirling down the wall's broken ramparts, gathering wraiths of snow. In its heart, faint motes of green glinted, memory of the fire he had glimpsed. The Night King studied those motes, studied how they trembled and died in the cold. His lips parted in something akin to curiosity. Then he raised his spear to the storm clouds, beckoning them forward. The dead marched. Ice would meet fire, and decide whether man deserved the dawn. And Varys finally guided the battered convoy through the next treacherous fens. Catty-sized mosquitoes harassed mules. Will-o-wisps bobbed over peat pools. Crates rattled with each rut, each hummock. Yet behind every hardship flickered the deeper rhythm of Jar's pulsing heat. They seemed alive now, attuned to their handler's heartbeat. Campfires glinted along the western levee, Sansa's encampment. Northern banners drooped in damp wind. Direwolf, Merman, mailed fist. Varys' lungs released breath held since the twins. A host of armored men emerged, led by Brienne, eyes wide at scorched wagon sides. They ushered convoy through labyrinthine ditches into the central staging ground, where trenches yawned, ready to be filled with oil and miracle. Sansa greeted Varys beneath a hastily raised pavilion. Rain pattered canvas. She looked older than her 18 years, yet her gaze held winter steel. You risked much, she said, voice modulated. The Dragon Queen is 3 days out. Can your wildfire wait? It will wait, Varys assured, though uncertainty tugged at him. But the dead will not. We must deploy at once. Sansa nodded. We've dug channels. The pyromancers you summoned instruct our sappers. All that remains is alignment with Joan's advance. Thunder rumbled, not skies, but distant clanging of armored columns. The ground quivered. Brienne's hand tightened on sword. Very stepped to tent flap. Beyond trenches, torches bobbed. A horn ululated, the night's code for allied approach. Riders galloped through gate, cloaks whipping. Their leader swung down. Jon Snow, hair sodden, eyes haunted yet fierce. He clasped Sansa, then turned to Varys. "You brought hell," he said. "I did," Varys answered. "Good, because hell walks behind me." Jon gestured to the marsh causeway where silhouettes amassed. Wildlings, Night's Watch, men of the north, of the Vale. Some bore dragon glass axes. Others clutched courage and nothing else. And behind them, far behind, a pall of frost glimmered beneath starlight, a promise that the others advanced. Jon pointed at the trenches. "We cannot rely solely on fire. My men will man the line. Your jars must ignite only when the first ranks of whites press our shields." Varys bowed. The pyromancers stand ready. Lightning forked across sky, illuminating the neck in stark tableau. Half a realm arrayed in fevered hope, half a nightmare closing. Rain intensified, sizzling on braziers. Varys felt droplets hiss where they struck his still singed sleeves, as though each watery kiss feared the fire lurking beneath cloth. "Where's the queen?" Jon asked. Tyrion stepped forward, soaked cloak streaming. "On her way. Dragons cannot fly storms slower than these winds. She will come." Jon's jaw tightened. "She must." Varys looked from brother to sister, from lord to knight, from marsh to horizon, and felt the moment telescope into perfect clarity. This night balanced on a wire strung between conflagration and oblivion. Green flame slumbered in earthen trenches, waiting. Blue flame marched in sockets of enemy eyes, relentless. And above them all, dragons would soon paint the sky in violent wonder, or never soar these heavens again. He took the copper key from his pocket, its teeth blackened with residue from the twins. He pressed it into Jon Snow's palm. "Should I fall?" he murmured. "This unlocks the last casks. Use them wisely." Jon's gloved fist closed around metal warm from Varys' body. Rain drummed on pavilion. Thunder boomed. This time, thunder proper. And the wind shifted, carrying faint scent of ash. The pieces were in place. The board awaited only its final players. Varys drew a steadying breath. The next jar, he shattered, might ignite the dawn, or extinguish it forever. He whispered to himself. Perhaps to the gods. Perhaps to the key. Perhaps to the ghost of a child who once feared the dark. Let fire remember mercy. Then he stepped into the rain toward the trenches, as northern drums began their solemn call to stand. Kandaon, Ejay. Wind keened across the neck, threading through reeds and flapping half-raised banners, as if the land itself tried to speak a warning none would heed. Rain hammered cuirass and kettlehelm, drummed on trench boards, hissed when it found the shallow channels already half filled with pale green liquid that smelled of rotted lemons and lightning. Torches guttered in the gale, forced low so their flames would not leap before the hour. Yet every man felt the wildfire's breath on his cheeks, warmer than summer, patient as fate. Jon Snow walked the inner berm, cloak heavy with water, ghost-white streaks of mud laddering his boots. He greeted each cluster of soldiers with a nod and a husked word that sounded like steel striking flint. "Hold." Wildlings answered with wolfish grins, umbers with throat-tearing cheers, brothers of the watch with solemn taps of fist to heart. Fear gripped them all, but Jon had learned in death and rebirth that fear, named aloud, became another tool. Tonight, he named it in every glance, every quiet word, then turned it outward toward the rolling dark where eyes of blue hid. At the forward line, Tormund Giantsbane squatted beside a wicker basket, piled with obsidian-tipped javelin. He squinted up at Jon through a matted mane of hair that rain could not tame. "The Spider-Spark lad says the fire goes whoosh the moment he whistles," Tormund rumbled, jerking thumb toward a thin pyromancer who looked ready to faint. "We need notches on the trench posts, else his aim drifts." Jon knelt, knife flashing as he carved a series of shallow grooves into the wood. "Whistle sharp and quick," he told the alchemist. "First blast we douse the front. Second, the middle. Third, the back. If any whistle sounds out of order, Assume the trench breached and fall behind the second line. The alchemist nodded so hard his green lacquered mask rattled. Ghost padded from the murk, first slicked silver. He nuzzled John's gauntlet, then stared north, lips peeling from fangs in a silent snarl. Far off, no horn sounded, yet something vast moved. An intuition that ran colder than sleet through the marrow of every living thing. Behind the front, Tyrion Lannister rested atop a supply barrel, scribbling notes even as droplets smeared ink. Beside him, Davos Seaworth tightened rope round a crate of flasks. "A dozen yards too near that trench and we roast like mackerel," the smuggler muttered. Tyrion scratched his chin. Roasted mackerel would be a pleasant change. Dead men rarely cook their meals. He snapped the ledger shut and peered toward Jon. "We lack a signal for Daenerys. If clouds thicken, dragons could miss the blaze." Jon shook rain from his hair. "Dragons sense fire, and the Night King may show sooner." He gazed eastward where a curtain of mist rolled, backlit by unearthly glow. Lightning stitched across the clouds, silent. With every pulse, shapes flickered inside, antlers, tusks, wings of frost. He felt his heart tighten. The drums began, slow, measured, echoing across shallows. First northern skin drums, then hollow thuds of wildling bone drums. The rhythm merged with rainfall until the world pulsed as one giant artery. Sansa stood upon a wooden watchtower behind the second trench, cloak fur-trimmed yet flattened by wet. She watched Jon through the haze. When his dark figure turned her way, she lifted a hand gloved in gray wolfskin. The gesture looked small in the storm, yet Jon felt it like sun on face. He returned the sign, then drew Longclaw, its hilt gleaming with water pearls. Far across the fens, a horn moaned. A low, single note that carried above wind, though no fleshly lips could have formed it. Battalion commanders froze. Ghosts' hackles speared skyward. Another horn answered, this one to the west, then another behind it, forming a triangle of dreadful music that hemmed living in sound. The ground trembled, the sort of tremor no hoofbeat made, more like glaciers grinding in secret. Shapes manifested at the mist's edge, a front rank of dead giants, 20 strong, rib cages gaping like broken wagons, each bearing a tree trunk as club. In the hollows of their eye sockets smoldered ice-blue coals that did not blink. Between their legs flowed tides of whites. Soldiers and small folk lost along the King's Road. Drowned fishermen from the Sisters. Children still clutching dead toys fused to bone. They advanced without war cry or roar, only the whisper of thousands of feet sloshing through muck. Jon raised Longclaw high. The pyromancers along the front trench lifted whistles to lips. Wait, Varys pleaded inwardly, crouched behind a berm with copper cast trigger in hand. Rain blurred his vision. He counted breaths. 10 to steady, 10 to mark distance. The giants waded closer, shoulders now visible above reeds. The Night King rode behind them on that elk of living ice, spear aimed like prophecy. Lightning carved a white crown around him and went out. The flame in Varys' chest faltered. Fire attracts cold. Jon's voice cracked through wind. Torches! Dozens ignited, heads wrapped in pitch, held behind shields so sparks would not stray. Obsidian blades were hefted. Shields overlapped. The first giant reached the trench's lip and swung. His trunk crashed onto palisade posts, snapping 3 at once, but the gap barely spanned a yard. Whites poured at the break, piling bodies to make a bridge. Still, Jon waited. The air vibrated with the massed dead. A second giant sank knee-deep into soft ground, stalled. A third shoved him aside. Their stagger slowed the horde. Now, Varys thought, and signaled. The lead pyromancer blew once. Shrill, urgent. Instantly torches arced into the trench. Wildfire embraced the pitch with greedy tongues, and a wall of emerald burst upward, kilometers wide, writhing as though alive. The roar deafened, the heat slapped with hammer weight. Rain flashed to steam, mist boiled, reeds combusted so quickly they became phantom ashes. The night turned green, casting ghastly radiance upon the faces of living and dead alike. Giants reeled, coated in napalm brightness. Their fur cloaks became torches, bone cracked, marrow hissing. Some kept forward momentum, only to plunge into trench, detonating jars buried beneath, and launching geysers of flame that streaked high, then rained in droplets like burning emerald rain. Whites caught fire, limbs flailing yet still scrambling until muscle charred away, bones toppled. Cheering erupted behind John, but he barked. "Hold second line!" He knew this was the easy moment, when courage seemed adequate. The Night King's elk halted just beyond the heat. Frost vapor curled from its nostrils and turned to snow crystals mid-air. The king himself regarded the fire with something like scholarly bemusement. He dismounted, walked 10 measured paces closer, and thrust his spear into the mud. Instantly, white light pulsed from its tip, a shock wave invisible save for the way rain reversed course and flew outward in a dome. Where it struck Wildfire, the flames guttered, flickered, then bent sideways, as if a monstrous, invisible hand parted them. John's stomach lurched. The Night King strode into the newly opened breach, flames licking around him yet veering away as though repulsed. Whites followed in his slipstream, untouched. "Second whistle," Varys cried, forcing breath past terror. A second note trilled. Archers loosed fire arrows across the gap, striking catch pits deeper in the fen. Another trench erupted, nearer the living line, sending heat that shoved soldiers back. The Night King paused, his cloak smoldered but did not ignite. He lifted both hands, and icicles formed in midair, dozens, each long as a pipe. He flung them without gesture. They streaked through smoke, skewering men on battlements, impaling a pyromancer whose whistle fell silent forever. Sansa watched 3 soldiers tumble from their post, bodies pierced clean. She forced her voice to carry. "Archers, focus. Aim for the eyes." Shafts thickened the air, many sizzling as they met heat columns. Some struck whites behind the king, but none touched him. Brienne vaulted from tower to ground, sword drawn, leading a wedge of Vale infantry into the gap. Maester squires dumped sacks of crushed obsidian into braziers, scooping handfuls of black glass as if grains of sand, flinging them at any creature that neared. The shards bit like acid. Where they landed on a white's flesh, it splintered, fracturing up limbs until bodies cracked apart. Yet they came. Jon dashed forward, Longclaw a slash of dusk, carving through 2 skeletal warriors. He skidded on flame-slick mud, parried a frost-rimmed sword, kicked its wielder back into fire. Torment crashed beside him, splitting skull with great axe, screaming insults at the Night King whose expression never shifted. Behind them, the last wagons of Wildfire, held in reserve per Tyrion's plan, clattered closer, escorted by knights of the Hollow Hill. Varys sprinted with them, robes tattered, holding a jar bare-handed. The heat seeped into his palms as though matching his own pulse. Tyrion, atop a palfrey too tall for him, saw Varys and shouted above cacophony, "We need dragonfire now!" No messenger could ride skyward, but Drogon answered anyway. A roar thundered behind Cloudbank. Wind reversed. Clouds shredded as the black dragon descended like a blazing comet. Rhaegal followed, his green scales glinting ironically under Wildfire glow. Viserion, a pale blur. They plunged from different vectors, converging on the Night King's flank. The king turned. He extended a hand. Lightning, not from sky but from his cold, lanced toward Drogon, wrapping him in veins of white. Drogon shrieked, wings convulsing. He banked south, smoke trailing from scorched talons, but he did not fall. Behind, Viserion belched golden flame that merged with green trenches, amplifying into a torrent. The Night King's aura flickered, as though even his power strained. Daenerys, hair whipping about her face, guided Drogon lower, jaws opening. The moment before she loosed fire, Jon glimpsed it through parting smoke. A child white, no older than 6, clutching the torn arm of a doll, stumbling into the breach. He leapt, catching the creature before it crossed the palisade, shattered its skull with dragonglass dagger. Remorse ripped him, but nothing could be done for the dead. Daenerys bathed the king's rear guard in crimson inferno, Bodies disintegrated, mud vitrified. The Night King raised spear to sky and hurled it like a star, trailing shards of ice. Drogon rolled sideways. The spear missed by a breath yet froze rain in path, forming a crystal tunnel that shattered behind him. Shards peppered allied ranks, slicing skin. Then Bran Stark's whisper reached every heart, though none understood how. A single word whispered inside skulls, now. Atop a ridge of willow, a murder of crows burst into flight, swirling black against emerald. Bran's consciousness rode them, weaving through flame smoke boundary. He willed 2 crows to dive toward the Night King's spear still lodged in muck from earlier thrust. Small beaks cannot wield weapons, but Bran was more than crow. He was storm of wings. Dozens converged, pecking ice lattice at spear's base, cracking it ever so slightly. The Night King sensed, spun, exactly when Jon charged, using the momentary distraction. Longclaw's Valyrian steel met the king's blade of opaque frost with a shriek of atoms. Shock surged up Jon's arm. Ice spidered along the steel, yet did not break it. Old magic thrummed inside the runes. Sparks soared. The king's strength outmatched any mortal, but Jon flowed with every blow, redirecting, stepping inside. He slashed across the king's breastplate. Steel skittered but left faint, glowing welt. The king's free hand clamped Jon's throat, squeezing cold. Breath froze. Brienne barreled in, Oathkeeper of Flaming Arc after passing too close to Trenchglow. She chopped at the elbow, gripping Jon. The king released. Brienne staggered as her blade met something immovable. Together, she and Jon pressed. Drogon swooped low, jaws spewing liquid fire. Jon and Brienne threw themselves aside. The torrent washed over the king, enveloping him. For 1 second hope sang. But inside the cauldron of flame, a silhouette remained upright. Wings of fire arcing back, leaving radiating emptiness. When the flames dispersed, the king still stood, armor molten, skin glowing like kiln-baked porcelain, yet intact. From the ridge, Bran pushed harder, crows shrieking. The spear's ice fissured deeper. The king glanced toward it. Small tell, and Bran unleashed final gambit. He dove his entire spirit into the elk. The creature bucked, frost hoof stomping ground. Bran twisted its muscles, making it charge full tilt at its former master. The Night King pivoted, leaving flank open. Jon saw. He dashed, leapt, drove Longclaw through that glowing welt left earlier. Valyrian edge met ancient secret heart. Ossified flesh split, releasing a hiss like glaciers calving under volcano. The king's eyes flared brightest azure, then shattered into snow crystals. His body crashed, cracking like dropped glass. Silence rippled outward. Wights within 50 paces jerked, spasmed, collapsed as if strings cut. Giants toppled, sending geysers of mud. But beyond that radius, others still moved, animated by lesser lieutenants who gathered on ridgetops, screeching. A ragged cheer roared from the living ranks. Tears washed grime from faces. Yet Varys clutched one last jar, staring at the lieutenants who rallied stragglers. "We are not finished," he murmured. A fresh wind howled, conjured by no sorcerer, just weather finding a gap. It blew sheets of rain into trenches. Wildfire hissed, dimming. Tyrion galloped to Varys. "If that goes out, the next wave crushes us. We need to spread what's left before water kills it." Varys weighed the jar. Life and death, mercy and ruin. He ran toward a partially snuffed segment where whites pressed, stepping on charred corpses to bridge. He hurled the jar into their midst. It burst, igniting as though insulted by water, rekindling a green inferno that roared downwind, touching unspent channels. Second-line trenches awakened, flame coursing like veins, renewing the shield. The lieutenants shrieked, retreating behind their forces. Enough time for dragons to descend again. Rhaegal strafed, left flank with Jade Flame. Viserion torched right. Drogon banked above Jon, who signaled him to slam center ranks. Together, human and beast ground the undead between walls of alchemist fire. Snow turned to steam. Night flashed with unnatural dawn. When finally no movement stirred beyond flicker of dying green, Jon plunged Longclaw into muck and sank to knees. Rain washed his hair flat. Steam curled from blade like sigh of ghosts departing. Sansa arrived breathless, skirts mud-flecked. She knelt against her brother, pressed brow to his. No words. Tormund thumped Jon's back until ribs ached. Brienne leaned on sword, shoulders heaving. Varys stood apart, watching Wildfire gutters wink out one by one as rain reclaimed kingdom. Each dying flame left afterimages on his vision, of children's faces, cities saved or destroyed. He realized his hands still shook. Tyrion dismounted near him, pulling a skin of wine, offering. Varys declined. Later perhaps, when we know cost. Tyrion swigged, coughed. Cost is always counted by the living. Tonight at least we still have accountants. They walked among heaps of blackened bones. The stench pierced even heavy rain. Acrid, metallic. Something older than rot, but newer than sin. Varys paused at a charred giant skull half submerged. The green glow within eyes slowly fading. He bowed head. From dark, Maeve approached, leading 2 surviving wagons. Pyromancers say stores nearly spent, she reported. Jars enough for perhaps 2 more cataclysms. Let us hope there are only 1.5 left, Varys answered. Thunder, honest thunder, rumbled beyond eastern shore. Bronze dawn tinted clouds. Rain eased to mist. Survivors gathered, torches now safe. Davos oversaw digging of pits for fallen friends separate from enemy remains. Wildlings sang funeral dirges to red mothers and blue flowers. Northern men hummed the bear, and the maiden fair softer than lullabies. Unsullied stood silent sentinel over their scant casualties. Jon, cloaked in borrowed blanket, approached Daenerys where she knelt beside Drogon's scorched hind leg, applying salve. He cleared throat. She glanced up, weary eyes bright with unshed tears. He will fly again, Jon said. She nodded, stroking scale. And you? Will you? I've no wings, he answered, half smile. But I have roads yet. She rose, swaying with fatigue. The Night King is gone. Are we free? Jon gazed across blackened marsh where wind gently bowed reeds still standing. His lieutenants remain, but without him they're scattered. Winter's heart is broken. Then Daemon as at all. Because of fire you feared to loose. Because of fire we mastered. And friends who braved more than fire. Daenerys looked toward Varys. Soot-streaked eunuch returning her gaze. She inclined head, and he returned gesture. A silent pact, that whatever blame hung over Wildfire's horrors, it would be shared. Above, clouds bruised violet parted to reveal the morning star. Bran saw through a raven perched there and whispered relief into the world. Not language, simply a lessening of tension in every sinew, a note of peace after discord. He tucked memory of green fire into archives of weirwood, a lesson that life's saviors might look like monsters while monsters sometimes pass as men. 2 days later, at council held within Riverrun's hall, leaders confronted reckonings. Rivers, north of Moat, still steamed. Small folk whispered of fish boiled alive, yet fields south bloomed with late barley spared frost. Letters arrived. White Harbor's safe, Barrowton reclaimed by living. Eastwatch ruins now circled by fires, lit from captured jars. Each missive bore a smear of soot, as if saga could not be written without charcoal fingerprint of violence. The council debated remaining Wildfire. Some urged burial so no tyrant could abuse it. Others argued it formed deterrent against future Night Kings. Tyrion closed dispute. Keep it but under counsel of all realms. Fire born of fear must be governed by trust. Surprisingly, Sansa agreed, and so did Davos, and Tormund after being told he could not drink the jars. That night, Varys wandered ramparts of Riverrun, moonlight silvering scorched stones damp from fresh rain. He pondered letters of thanks from villages saved by flames he had shipped. pondered rumors of nightmares that would haunt children who saw undead burn green. He felt lighter yet sadder. Pyromancers told him each jar contained roiling substance that aged, became more volatile with passing years. Like kingdoms, he mused, unattended, they fester until only conflagration releases them. Footsteps approached. Tyrion, flask in hand. "Now you'll drink," he said. Varys accepted. Wine tasted of ashes and blackberries. They leaned on Crenel, watching stars. "Do you think history will praise us?" Varys asked. Tyrion burped softly. "History will misquote us, friend. It will say dragons saved men and Wildfire was footnote. And that is fine. Let poets gild scales and forget the jars. The living need legends of glory, not ledger of horrors." Varys smiled. Then I shall keep the ledger myself. Someone should remember the price." They drank in silence until dawn tinged the sky peach. Somewhere roosters crowed, though none lived in castle. Perhaps memory of roosters, echo of normalcy returning. Varys straightened. The Queen sails for King's Landing. The North seeks treaties. I must pack ink enough for politics, easier than flames, more dangerous. Tyrion clapped his shoulder. Try not to ignite debate the same way. I make no promises. Varys descended steps, robe whispering. In courtyard, children chased one another, brandishing wooden swords, pretending to be dragons and wolves. When they swung, they shouted not roar or howl but whoosh, imitating Wildfire's surge. Varys winced yet warmed. Even terror becomes play in hands of youth. Perhaps tomorrow it becomes caution instead of fear. He entered Scribe's chamber where Maeve sorted reports. He dictated letters to lords requiring reparations for villages, scorched by mist-thrown flasks. He ordered pyromancers audited, their stores catalogued, keys distributed threefold. One to North, one to Crown, one to Citadel. Checks against madness. Procedural threads in new web he spun. Evening confronted him with final tally. 3,000 living lost. Corpses of 20,000 wights destroyed. 9 undead giants felled. 3 dragons wounded but alive. 1 night king vanquished. 18 jars of Wildfire unspent. Balance sheet of apocalypse. He closed ledger. Cinched cord. Sealed with wax, impressed by a signet. Shaped not of spider, but of torch. To remind him whose light guided last night. Then he blew out candle. Darkness flowed but did not frighten. Memory of green blaze lingered behind eyelids. Proof that where cold sought dominion, fire, however terrible, could answer. Across 7 kingdoms, survivors buried dead beneath mounds that steamed faintly in winter sunlight. At those funerals, men spoke of a furnace in the neck that held the dawn. They spoke of dragons, of a stark king reborn, of a silver queen crossing sea, of a spider who wove flames. Some whispered relief, others revenge. All felt breath once more in their lungs. Spring arrived early that year, timid shoots piercing cemented mud before snows fully melted, as though land itself hurried to cover scars. And in quiet moments, farmers swore they still heard a faint crackle under soil. Echo of Wildfire's heart, cooling at last. Varys traveled with Daenerys to King's Landing. When the city towers came into view, rose gold in sunrise, he felt jar weight still in satchel. One final vessel, kept not for war, but remembrance. He would bury it beneath the Tower of the Hand, deep and sealed. A monument to the night men burnt darkness with poisoned light. He vowed never to raise Wildfire again, unless darkness learned new names. For though flame seared, it also warned. As long as tinder remained, some would choose to strike flint. Better then to build hearths than pyres, guide warmth rather than gamble with conflagration. Behind him, bells pealed as dragon wings shadowed rooftops. Ahead, a city braced to greet conquerors who had defended rather than razed. And within Varys's breast, 2 halves, light shone, darkness kept, shifted toward fragile balance, tempered in green fire. N.K. Morning fog pooled in the gutters of King's Landing, softening the jagged skyline into muted charcoal shapes. that breathed with every gust off Blackwater Bay. Fishermen navigating the estuary paused at the strange stillness blanketing the capital. Gulls wheeled but did not cry, as though even scavengers awaited the verdict of new rulers. From the deck of Vagar's Wrath, Daenerys watched the city materialize by degrees. First, the smoke-scarred battlements of the Red Keep, then the griffin-perched towers of Sept Baelor's ruins, still draped in scaffolding, and finally the tiled sprawl of slanted roofs that shimmered with last night's rain. Yet it was not the sight that stole her breath so much as the pervasive hush. A city accustomed to clamor now held its voice, wary of dragons that circled like omens above the bay. She sensed 500,000 hearts beating in unison with her own, frightened and expectant, each pulse naming its price for hope. Tyrion approached from the quarterdeck, cloak snapping in salt-sweet wind. "The gates remain barred," he reported. "Lord Selmy rides ahead to arrange entry, but I doubt any gold cloak wishes to test Drogon's temper." His attempt at levity collapsed beneath the sheer weight of what they both knew. The war against the dead had cost the living their appetite for more blood. Yet the throne still glimmered like bait for tragedy. He glanced toward Rhaegal banking low over the city walls to scatter a flight of ravens. "We must tread lighter than dragon wings, my queen." Daenerys exhaled, lightly enough to land, yet firmly enough that the realm feels the ground beneath us. Our banners bear scorch marks from the neck. Let them remind every lord that we did not cross this sea for conquest alone. Madame stepped. Below deck, Varys stood at an open porthole, inhaling the brine-laced air as if to confirm reality after nights suffocated by wildfire fragrance. The lone surviving jar nested in a cedar case at his feet, tight-lidded, lead-sealed. Nevertheless, its dormant heat warmed the soles of his slippers. He rested a palm on the wood, half tempted to slide it overboard into fathoms, so deep even rumor could not retrieve it. But prophecy, his own whisper-cobweb version of prophecy, stayed his hand. Knowledge once erased rarely remained gone. Safer that the jar rest where responsible hands might study it when memory of horror dimmed. He rehearsed the precise chamber beneath the tower of the hand where he would embed the cask. 3 tons of rubble above it, pyromancer's sigils warning reckless successors. Even so, he shivered. Some fires would always find oxygen, no matter how deep their burial. The fleet glided past the rotted hulks that still littered the river mouth from Stannis' failed assault years prior. As they turned north along the docks, stevedores froze at their ropes. Children pointed at Rhaegal's silhouette and clutched each other. Davos Seaworth called out commands to the harbor master, in a voice equal parts sailor and Lord Dai. He felt the city's pulse too, though from the vantage of a smuggler who had once crept these same piers at midnight. Now he measured whether shadows held crossbows, or merely fear. Salt spray dashed across his beard. His heart answered with the quiet joy of survival, and the heavier ache of what survival had cost. By mid-morning Daenerys, Jon, Tyrion, Varys, and a hand-picked honor guard rode through the Gate of the Gods, Drogon pacing overhead like an ebony thunderhead. The streets yawned empty, except for thin lines of small folk crouched under doorframes, faces ghost-pale, eyes darting between banners, Targaryen red, Stark gray, Tyrell gold resurrected on a borrowed standard courtesy of gentry. Each color carried a memory of famine, siege, or wildfire, yet none with the clarity of brand-new green flames flickering behind eyelids across the realm. The people bowed without cheer, and their silence rang louder than rebellion. Daenerys kept her gaze forward, resisting the urge to toss silver stags as visories once advised when begging affection. Coins could not mend souls singed by both ice and fire. At the top of Aegon's high hill, they dismounted before the Red Keep's carved bronze doors. Grey Worm posted unsullied along every arch. Their polished spears reflected the city's cloudy light. No Lannister lions opposed them. Sir Bronn, newly appointed commander of the City Watch, stepped forward instead, helm tucked underarm, grin half-shaped and wary. "Your Grace," he drawled to Daenerys. "The throne room is empty, warm as a summer whore's smile, and nobody's nicked the iron chair. Not even me, though I admit the notion crossed my mind." His grin faltered when Drogon settled behind him, gargantuan wings stirring dust devils across the courtyard. But seeing as the lad with the sword that burns blue in winter just saved us all, I'm content with my current seat," he added. Jon answered with a nod. "See that the city remains calm, Lord Bronn. Food stores must stretch. Fear will starve faster than hunger if rumors of undead stragglers reach these walls." Bronn sketched an exaggerated bow and strode off to bark orders, already calculating which corners of lawlessness he might leverage into profit under the new regime. Inside the great hall, sunlight slanted through immense windows, shattered during Cersei's final desecration, yet never replaced. Jagged shards still clung to lead casements like teeth. Their fractured panes painted the flagstones in crooked prisms that waned or flashed as clouds drifted overhead. At the far end, the Iron Throne loomed. Still savage, still oddly vulnerable in emptiness, its barbs and rivets streaked with spiderwebs. Daenerys halted a spear's length from its first step, heartbeat drumming latticework of childhood dreams and cautions. Jon stopped beside her. Silence thickened until even clatter of unsullied boots retreated behind the ringing of their ears. Tyrion cleared his throat. A city of ashes once considered new fire salvation. Now a city of survivors fears the very spark that spared them? How shall we reassure them? Daenerys inhaled. With councils, not coronations. She stepped back from the throne, turning instead to the lesser dais where Hand of the King normally addressed smallfolk petitions. The realm needs to witness debate, not decree. Jon sheathed Longclaw. Then let's speak. Here now. Not about crowns but about seeds. Food, roads, wounds to bind before infection sets in. Sansa entered at that moment with Brienne and Sir Davos. Rush travel had left mud caked to hem and gauntlets, yet she carried herself as if draped in Taroshi silk. "I could not agree more," she said, voice steady. "Winterfell's barns overflow for once. We brought what wagons could carry. Still, grain will sour before it reaches storm-cut roads. The Citadel's archmasters drafted crop rotations for southern soils robbed by frost. We must deploy them immediately." Davos bowed slightly in Sansa's direction. "And we'll need ships, fast ones, to carry the surviving obsidian to every castle still clearing wights from forgotten crypts." Daenerys gestured for Varys to join. He hesitated, glance flicking to the throne. That single surviving jar weighed his satchel. In it burned power enough to crisp this hall again. He understood his private burden mirrored the group's collective one. What to do with dormant forces capable of rebirth? Be they dragons, wildfire, or crowns forged of swords. He stepped into circle, voice hushed soft. "We must also soothe the faith militant. Their numbers rose during Cersei's zealotry, and many saw the green fire in the neck as sorcerous affront. A raven from the High Septon demands audience. He prays we did not trade necromancy for daemonry." "Nandancy." Joan's brow furrowed. "They must hear truth. There was no necromancy in our choice, only desperation." Tyrion's lip twitched. "Truth often resembles sorcery when few understand science. We'll invite the High Septon to inspect the Wildfire stores under armed escort. Transparency tastes bitter, but cures suspicion." As they spoke, Brienne drifted toward the dais steps. Oathkeeper glimmered beneath the broken windows like a blood smear in a dream of glass. She stared at the Iron Throne, brow knitted. Once she had sworn fealty to a king's brother, once to a shadow of a wolf, now to a queen who wielded flame. Each vow heavy and necessary, yet none final. She wondered what shape oaths would take in a world forged by green infernos. Whether swords of Valyrian steel might serve better as plowshares. She sheathed Oathkeeper and stepped back. The conference stretched hours. Messengers varied lists of missing persons and pockets of undead still staggering across the Crownlands. Tyrion's ink stained 3 separate parchments as he sketched new grain levies, trade leniencies, and amnesty for Stormlanders who had sided with Euron Greyjoy. Varys presented a chart of surviving maesters skilled in science of firefighting, distributing them across key storehouses. Sansa proposed an interim ruling council, 1 seat each for North, Vale, Riverlands, Stormlands, Reach, Dorne, Crownlands, and the Free Cities delegates soon to arrive with relief convoys. Daenerys surprised many by supporting that view, postponing her coronation until spring planting succeeded. Her words rippled through stone like a draft of air extinguishing candle gossip. As dusk bled through broken windows, the group recessed to private corners. Sansa lingered near a ragged tapestry depicting Aegon's first descent on Balerion. Threads dulled by dust. Jon joined her. "Father once told me tapestries preserve what steel cannot," he said, voice nearly swallowed by cavernous hall. "But these colors fray." Sansa traced a worn dragon scale, woven in faded crimson. "Perhaps that is mercy, that children see softer hues than war's fresh scars." She glanced toward Daenerys, who conferred with Missandei and Grey Worm. "Do you trust her restraint?" Jon followed her gaze. "She tempered fire with counsel today." "I trust that more than any promise forged in lonely rooms." He rested a hand on her shoulder. "And I trust you to challenge her if restraint wavers." Sansa allowed herself the hint of a smile. "Challenge I can. Persuade may take more skill." She squeezed his hand once, then moved to speak with Pycelle's interim replacement, an archmaester named Galen, cheeks still ruddy from his first ride outside Old Town's cloisters. Night deepened, torches lit in iron sconces, dribbling resin across cracked columns. Varys stood alone at the hall's edge, gauging where torch shadows pooled in floor depressions left by Tyrell roses, long scraped away. Footsteps approached. Maeve, hood lowered, bearing a sealed parchment scented faintly of salt and myrrh. She offered it wordlessly. Varys slit the wax. Inside, a single sentence in cipher he taught her years ago. "The cold crone gathers shards at the Dreadfort." Beneath, a charcoal rubbing of a sigil, spiral of frozen tears. His throat tightened. So at least one lieutenant survived, rallying broken whites deep in the North's heartland. Time bought by wildfire burned short. He found Jon near the dais. "A remnant of the Night King's power festers at the Dreadfort," Varys whispered. Raven's whisper of a creature called the Cold Crone. Perhaps once a mother who fell at Hardhome, now wielding shards of his will. He handed Jon the rubbing. "If she rebuilds his army, everything we did in the neck was prelude." Jon's gaze hardened as if frost cracked across his eyes. "Then we ride." "Not you alone," Daenerys interjected, having glided toward them. "Dragonfire ended the king. Let Dragonfire finish his brood. But we need care. No wildfire trenches among castles still sheltering survivors." Varys inclined head. "Agreed. A surgical flame, not a curtain of holocaust." Jon shifted, weight of responsibility pressing like wet mail. "Give me 1 week to gather Stark soldiers and wildling trackers. We cut off her supply of corpses, starve her of raw material. Dragons strike her nest. Sansa joined, overhearing last words. "The Dreadfort still houses frightened tenants, women and children hidden in crypts. A siege of dragons might roast them alongside whites." Tyrion limped forward, expression grave. "Then infiltration. Flames reserved for within the walls, once human shields removed." Davos rubbed temples. "Infiltration of a ruin crawling with risen dead. They smell living blood like sharks scent chum." Brienne laid gauntleted fingers on Davos' forearm. "Not if the living blood is faint." "I volunteer. My heart beats slow," Maester Luwin once remarked on it. "I can escort survivors out while dragons stand ready." Sansa shook her head. "I won't risk you alone. I intend to take Podrick. A handful of Night's Watch Rangers," Brienne countered. "Enough eyes, little noise." Plan spiraled. Grey Worm sketched unit placements. Jon calculated travel by King's Road, still choked with storm debris. Sansa negotiated releasing grain guides north. Meanwhile, Daenerys' gaze strayed through broken windows to the darkening sky, where Drogon circled. Impatient, she felt the dragon's restlessness echo in her marrow. Another dance with ice awaited. 5 days later, a lean column departed the capital. 200 silent unsullied, 40 Stark archers, 12 seasoned rangers led by Edison Tollet, and Brienne's infiltration crew of 8. They traveled under gray banners to conceal allegiance, for a rumor of a revived foe sparked panic. Davos commanded the supply wagons, ensuring no wildfire flasks hid among cargo, only modest casks of lamp oil for torches. Jon rode ghost at the vanguard. Daenerys soared overhead upon Drogon at intervals, scouting, while Rhaegal and Viserion harried skylanes for lone beshadowed frostbird scouts, supposedly employed by the lieutenant. Roads once muddy were now threaded with early wildflowers sprouting after freak thaw. Yet glimpses of necrotic ruin persisted. Farmsteads whose thatch still wept icicles, cattle stiffened meadows half-eaten by crows, shallow graves surrounded by fly buzz. Each sight tightened hearts and quickened pace. They reached Moat Cailin in 2 days. Slush-wet stones still glowed faintly from wildfire, but cooled enough to cross. Wildling axes cleared shattered palisades, letting wagons chug through steamy gloom. At the far side of the causeway, Lady Meg Mormont awaited with 50 Bear Island spears. She saluted Jon with a grin fierce enough to shame storms. "Figured you'd need women who have practiced killing monsters their whole lives," she said. We rowed down the White Knife in longboats sewn from bear hide. Hardly traction for ice demons, but enough for mop-up. Jon clasped her arm, grateful. Ghosts sniffed the air, hackles only half raised, a sign of trust by direwolf standards. Together the expanded host marched east, skirting rebuilt Barrowton, where villages hammered new planks atop burned shells. Shadows of undead still skulked in woodlots. Archers felled them with dragonglass-tipped shafts, leaving corpses twitching harmlessly. None risked torches after wildfire. They let winter rot devour the remains, wind carrying ash away. On the 6th night, the column camped 3 leagues from the Dreadfort. They avoided lighting fires, yet a pale aurora shimmered overhead. Greenish trails undulating like reflections of wildfire's echo in distant sky. Rangers reported seeing shapes wandering ramparts. Women in tattered gowns. Children carrying blue-white lanterns, fashioned of human ribs. The cold crone herself appeared briefly on parapet, gaunt silhouette clutching crooked staff topped by a mirror shard cut from the Night King's own frozen spear. She raised it, and the aurora rippled faster, painting snowdrifts sickly turquoise. Brienne studied the fortress from a rise at dawn. Its black walls glistened with rime, gate cracked but intact. Smoke, no vapor, spiraled from arrow slits, as though the castle breathed in freezing gasps. She gathered infiltration team. Podrick in boiled leather blackened with soot. Lady Lyra Mormont slim and fearless. Rangers Mallister and Ged. 2 unsullied crossbowmen. And a silent figure Sansa had sent. Arya Stark, face hidden beneath hood. She unveiled now only to Brienne, revealing calm eyes and a grin sharp as Valyrian steel. "A girl is still learning," Arya whispered. Voice lighter than snow on fur, but she learned enough of shadows to pass a white's nose. Brienne swallowed pride and relief. "Then stay behind me but ahead of death." They clasped wrists, instructor to student, sister to sister in arms. At twilight, dragons would faint, drawing the crone's gaze skyward while team entered through Sally Port, mapped by Theon years earlier. Inna, Hylia. Twilight spilled violet ink across horizon as dragons shrieked above the Dreadfort. Drogon dived low, unleashing a torrent of red gold that evaporated before touching walls. An illusion of heat meant to harry defenders without harming prisoners. Rhaegal roared opposite flank, fanning wings to stir blizzard of powdered snow, cloaking infiltration path. Through that swirling veil, Brienne led her team across frozen moat, where black water hissed under dragonwind but did not break. Arya scampered ahead, pale blade needle glinting. She found the Sally Port, bars rusted but still formidable. Podrick produced a thin file of Valyrian steel gifted by Gendry, twisting until hinges squealed and parted. Inside, the corridors reeked of damp stones and old tallow. Shadows writhed, alive with cold vapor. They advanced in 2-person cells, dragonglass daggers wrapped in leather to muffle clink. Heatless blue sconces dotted walls, glowing like trapped lightning bugs. Occasionally they glimpsed whites. Gaunt men standing motionless beneath archways, eyes blank. Arya slipped behind each, severing spine with silent stroke. Whites folded without sound. The team counted 20 felled before reaching central courtyard. There the crone stood atop an altar made of inverted shields, fused by ice. She seemed once tall, now bent double, frost-encrusted hair cascading like cobwebs of glass. At her feet knelt 30 living captives. Peasants from lonely hills, 2 septas, a cluster of children. The crone traced runes in air with spear-shard staff, chanting breath that crystallized words into swirling sigils overhead. Each symbol drifted into a captive's chest, freezing them further until veins shone sapphire beneath skin. She was converting them while they still drew breath, forging obedient dead from unwilling living. Brienne's knuckles whitened on sword. She noted the courtyard layout. Wooden barrels of pitch stacked near wall, perhaps stored before Bolton collapse. A plan fluttered. Ignite pitch to draw crone's ire, rescue prisoners amid confusion. But flame risked harming innocence. Arya whispered, "I can reach her unseen." Eyes glimmered with the uncanny calm of faceless training. Brienne considered, shook head, too perilous. Yet sliding barrels alone required time. Above, Dragonfire roared anew. Crone paused, staff tilting as if listening. Opportunity. Brienne nodded to Arya. The girl slipped into gloom, hugging colonnade, moving like night air moving through cracks. Brienne, Podrick, and Unsullied pair crept toward prisoners, while Lady Lyra and rangers loosed crossbow bolts at wights stationed on battlements. Those wights shrieked, diving into courtyard to protect their mistress. The crone raised staff. Mirrored shard caught dragonfire flashes, focusing beams of ice that speared skyward, repelling Regal's swoop. As she did, Arya darted behind altar. A single leap, and she perched on dais edge. Needle gleamed, poised for back of skull. Yet just as she lunged, the crone twisted preternaturally, catching blade between 2 frost-encrusted fingers. Eyes like glaciers fixed on Arya. A grin cracked her visage, shedding ice flakes. Brienne saw and bellowed challenge, charging, but wights flooded between. Unsullied loosed bolts, dragging prisoners aside. Crone hissed, claws closing on Arya's throat. Arya smashed pommel into the shard, fracturing hairline crack. Mirrors howl as they break. This shard screamed like blizzard torn from mountainside. Crone recoiled, releasing. Atop rampart, Jon felt shard's cry resonate through mental marrow. He guided Drogon lower. Daenerys, astride, saw Arya tumble from dais, Crone raising staff to impale. She urged Drogon, a precise jet of flame directly at altar. Drogon obliged. Fire collided with mirrored shard now cracked. Instead of deflecting, the shard absorbed heat, fissures glowing red, then orange, then white-hot. Crone shrieked. Sound older than human memory, and staff exploded. Splinters of superheated mirror scattered, slicing whites and walls alike. Heat ripple, melted frost sheath around prisoners, but barely scorched skin. Crone staggered, internal fire and ice warring. Arya recovered, stabbed a needle into Crone's knee. Brienne closed, swinging Oathkeeper in 2-hand arc doitoi. Blade parted Crone's neck in spray of sapphire dust. Torso collapsed, limbs twitching, then crumbled to slush. Wights across yard convulsed, free of puppet strings. Many collapsed. Some fled into halls. Jon signaled Unsullied to secure exits. Prisoners sobbed. Half frozen but alive. Dragons alighted in courtyard, heat thawing stones. From their vantage Daenerys and Jon surveyed ruin. Crone's altar nothing but puddle of molten shield steel. Frost torches extinguished. Brienne leaned on sword, chest heaving. Arya wiped needle clean on her sleeve. Expression inscrutable. Rescue began. Davos guided prisoners to medical tents outside walls where maesters warmed limbs with cloths soaked in broth. Lady Lyra collected orphaned children, promising them bare island hearths. Rangers hunted scattered wights at dawn, finishing threat. As sun crested, Jon and Daenerys walked ramparts. Snowmelt dripped from crenels, pattering like summer rain. Jon studied the horizon. "Is this the last shadow?" he asked. "Shadows breed in corners," Daenerys answered. "But walls stand stronger for having faced them." She touched Drogon's scales, feeling slow heartbeats steady again. For the first time since leaving Valeria's ruins as a girl, she felt possibility of peace, not as fleeting lull between horrors, but as horizon they might chase. Okay. Weeks passed in tireless labor. Castles reopened, markets bustled with cautious laughter. Ravens carried tidings of marriage pacts between houses once sworn to extinction. King's Landing fashioned temporary glass panels for the Great Hall, casting softer light on debates where council argued taxes for widows of the neck defense. Twice Wildfire jars were relocated to new stone vault beneath Nun's Deep Keep closer to the sea, where brine dampened volatility. Keys divided between Daenerys, Sansa, and the Archmaester of Engines. An emergent order dedicated to safe study of dangerous crafts. On the first day of the 7th moon, banners rose above the city for a festival of renewal. Not a coronation, though rumor insisted crowns would appear. Instead, a field beyond the Dragon Pit hosted games. Archery, where contestants fired dragon-glass arrows at ice effigies. Song competitions praising the burning wall. Displays of healing arts by red priests and maesters alike. Children chased wooden wyverns on wheels, shouting, "Whoosh!" Older folk lit lanterns tinted emerald to remember the night fire-shielded dawn. Yet these lanterns floated upward on warm air, not down toward trenches, symbol that danger had passed overhead into sky. At sunset, Daenerys addressed throng from temporary stage. Jon, Sansa, Tyrion stood flanking. Grey Worm, Brienne, Davos behind. Varys watched from wings, hands clasped, jar long buried yet memory burning. Daenerys spoke of fractures, between north and south, between living and lost, between flame and frost. She refrained from promising gilded tomorrows. Instead, she pledged vigilance, healing, and voices shared. She ended by calling forth each representative of the new council to sign the Charter of Realms, a parchment thicker than any crown, sealed by 8 sigils enshrining rotational stewardship. No single throne, but a seat whose occupant changed with seasons. Targaryen for spring sowing, Stark for winter's harsh watch, Tyrell resurgent for summer plenty, Martell for fall's harvest, and seats for stormlands, Vale, Riverlands, Iron Islands rotating within their halves. If war returned, the seat vacated for council's majority vote. Cheers rolled like warm surf. Some cried at notion of dissolving the Iron Throne's singular rule. Others wept with relief. Varys exhaled. He had served mad kings and would-be saviors. Now he served a tapestry, frayed, complex, but woven by many hands. Spiders thrived in webs, yet he wondered if he might someday step beyond strands. Later, under glowing lanterns, Arya and Gendry danced beside a fountain where steam from heated pipes formed rainbow halos. Brienne sat on low wall with Podrick and Tormund, exchanging exaggerated tales of courage, until Podrick produced his lute. The crowd lulled to hush as he sang Ballad of the Green Wall. Davos toasted with Mage Mormont, both laughing at how far a smuggler and a bear lady had sailed from old prejudices. Jon walked with Daenerys along a quiet garden path behind the Red Keep. Fireflies hovered, a reminder that tiny flames could glow gentle rather than ravenous. They paused where roses once cultivated by Myrcella struggled toward new bloom. Jon brushed petals. "Even here," he murmured. "Green need not mean fear." Daenerys smiled. "A soft, unguarded thing. Let Wildfire's memory stand as a vow. Flames unleashed only to guard life, never to punish it." He leaned forehead to hers. "As long as brave hearts hold the keys, darkness will think twice before marching south." In the hush, Ghost padded over, shoving muzzle under Jon's hand. Drogon rumbled from his perch on a nearby tower, tail curled like resting cat. For a fleeting heartbeat, 2 beasts of legend coexisted in peace, guardians rather than weapons. Indidane. Months later, at a dawn still cool with lingering winter, Varys descended spiral stairs beneath Tower of the Hand, carrying a new ledger. Dust motes swirled in lantern glow. He reached the vault where Wildfire jar lay entombed beneath runic chains, triple locked. He did not open locks today. He merely set ledger on pedestal, inked first entry. Here lies the last jar of Eris's sorrow, refused by night, stewarded by dawn. May future generations read, remember, and forbear. He signed, Varys. On Spider, now steward of embers. Quill scratched final dot. He closed ledger, sealed it, and turned toward stairs. At threshold he paused, listening. Only distant murmur of city waking above, vendors hawking fresh bread, bells calling apprentices to guild halls, gulls chastising each other over river refuse. No hiss of jars, no whisper of ice, just life. He smiled, tired, content, wary as always. Then he climbed into sunlight. The world outside smelled of sea and barley, horse sweat and baking tarts, wood smoke and rose-new perfume. Street urchins dashed past, chasing a carved wooden dragon whose mouth spat harmless green ribbons fluttering from stick. They laughed gibberish about burning whites. Barry stepped aside, letting them streak onward, carrying stories echo into future. He adjusted silks and strode toward Great Sept's rebuilt plaza, where council would convene over seawall repairs. Politics thrived. He flourished among whispers. But now he carried not only secrets, but measure of hope, weightless yet potent. Wildfire saved the realm, yet only gentle flames, like lamps in healer tents, hearths in orphan halls, would keep it alive. Across rooftops, Drogon's silhouette crossed the sun, curving slowly, lazily. A guardian at leisure. Varys lifted face to warmth, silently thanking dragons, snowborn kings, warrior maids, and every soul who chose light when darkness beckoned. He whispered a parting mantra. Let fire remember mercy. Then he vanished into city's bustle, a spider at peace amidst humming embers. Far to the north, beyond Frostfang peaks where Aurora lingered even at noon, a lone shard of mirror lay buried in drift. It pulsed once, faint, tentative, then stilled under weight of snow. Should it ever pulse again, histories would recall not just one night of siege, but the covenant forged in its aftermath. Many keys, many voices, one watchful flame. And on that covenant the dawn widened, spilling gold across horizons that had too long known only the tyranny of white and green.